The Baggies Podcast, giving you the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. Now available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Hello Baggies fans and welcome to another episode of the Baggies Podcast. Back again, the final day of the Premier League season has come and gone. You won't be watching West Bromwich Albion in the Premier League for at least another season. We've known that for the past couple of games, but that's it now. You've watched your last dose of Premier League football for at least another year. A 3-1 defeat against Leeds United, our fellow promotees last season, automatically at least. It was a bit of a dull watch. We'll be going through all the latest match reaction from you guys and myself, and then we'll also be diving in to the deep conundrum is the Albion manager situation. Because last time we spoke, Sam Allardyce, we had the impression that he still had the full intentions to stay as manager. But since then, since the game against West Ham in midweek, he's decided that is not for him. So we'll be going through all of that. We'll be talking about Sam Allardyce, his decision to leave, and then I'm getting your thoughts because I need you for this one. I need you to tell me who is your manager. You've been coming in on Twitter. You've been barraging me with messages about who's going to be coming in as manager. You guys have been tweeting, you guys have been messaging. So yeah, we'll be reading out all of those, and I'll also be giving my pick as West Bromwich Albion manager in this episode. So stick around till the end for that. But first, it's time to mull over a fairly disappointing defeat at Leeds United. If you're new around here, make sure you drop a follow or a subscription onto the podcast platform that you're listening from, or a subscribe on YouTube is just as lovely. Or get involved via the podcast for future episodes at the Baggies Pod or at @LouisBent_. But without further ado, let's get into this. Okay, let's go. What a dull afternoon at Ellen Road for Leeds West Bromwich Albion. I mean, you look at the two sides that played today and you think, did they come up together as basically equals for most of the season until COVID hit and we decided to go on a bit of a slump? But were those two teams ever on par? It feels like light years away since then a 5-0 defeat and a 3-1 win for Leeds there. I mean, it's a pretty sad way to look at things now. Look at the way that they've completely leapfrogged us from the side that was on par with us for most of last season, but perhaps, towards after COVID we did slump off. But you think about that those two were two on par sides, really, weren't they? So yeah, it's a shame to see that, but yeah, we'll go into a bit of the game. I feel like we sort of rolled over for Leeds. We didn't really give them much of a anywhere near as much of a tussle as we probably should have or could have, because they were barely got even out of second gear, Leeds, and that's a compliment to them really, because they didn't really have to work very much to get their victory. Let's be honest, we sort of just sat deep and waited for them to score. There were far too many passengers in the game. I mean, I don't get the point in playing Maitland-Niles. I kind of get the point in playing Conor Gallagher and Yukuslu, because those are the two that maybe you might want to keep next season. But Maitland-Niles isn't staying. What's the point in even having him near the pitch, really? There were so many youngsters on the bench for a starter, which is nice to see youngsters on the bench. But we want to see youngsters on the pitch. We want to see these young lads who've come through our academy getting a chance. Today we had Tim Arabunam, who has been playing very well in the under-18s and also the under-23s. If you watch that cup run for the FA Cup, you'll know that he's been scoring absolute worldies after worldies in those particular games. Then we got Caleb Taylor, who's also been very good in those games. Was on the bench against Arsenal. So yeah, he was also there. And then we've got Taylor Gardner-Hickman, who I think has been in for 3 games so far, the past 3 games, and obviously this one in the squad. So yeah, they're on the bench, but they haven't been played at all. I mean, I get that you need to sort of build up that match day experience maybe for next season if you want to settle some nerves, because they are going to have some nervy moments, to be quite honest. Yeah, it's a strange one. It's a very strange one, but yeah, some youngsters included on the bench today, but there were plenty of players in that first squad. Robinson didn't particularly look interested. My sort of problem is that Allardyce announced his future before this game. I didn't see what the point was of looking next to the next one, because at the moment the players looked like they were giving about 50%. probably reflected by the fact that they've got a manager who's going to not be given his all because it's his final game in charge of West Bromwich Albion, and he knows it, and all the players know it. So they're looking at the manager and they're like, he doesn't want to be here, does he? He's not our manager anymore. So it's not. I didn't quite agree. I get he has to announce it at some point, but I don't see why that has to be now. Why it had to be right then. But yeah, Dean Garner got a bit of a game as well. So did Hal Robson-Kanu scoring the only West Bromwich Albion goal of the game. That's 2 and 3 for him now. So yeah, very good to see him getting on the score sheet. Obviously, he's the one that most people will moan and groan at when he comes on, but he still has managed to get a couple of goals in these past few games. Dean Garner getting a few appearances here. Leeds, West Ham, Liverpool, Arsenal. Nice to see him getting some minutes. I mean, he was okay in the West Ham game and the Liverpool game. I think he did a couple of nice skill moves. Did a couple of nice skill moves today. Could have scored actually. Dean Garner had the whole Leeds defence sat on their backsides, and all he had to do was plant it into the upper part of the net, and he just chucked it into the stand. So yeah, that was a shame to see. Leeds obviously bid quite an emotional farewell to two long-standing players in the 70th minute of Gaetano Berardi, who's been there since 2014, and Pablo Hernandez, who has been there since 2016 as well. So it was a bit of emotional farewell. Nice to see the Leeds fans in the ground, I do have to say. It's very nice to see them coming to support their team. Obviously, it's I know people will say, they're opposition fans, why are you saying that? But, I think we could all agree it's nice to see everybody back in the ground and people getting a go to go and watch their team play again. Doesn't really matter who you support, but it's nice to see them back in the ground again, and it was nice to see our fans back in the ground in midweek against West Ham. So saw a lot of people on Twitter going to that. So glad that even though it was a defeat, I think it did spur the players on a bit more. It just makes you think. Imagine what things would be like if we had fans in the ground all season. I think it'd be a bit different, especially under Allardyce playing on that crowd outside. And I feel like some of these thrashings just wouldn't have gone the same, because when you need a bit of motivation, the fans can often provide you with that. However, if they're not in the ground, they can't really do anything. They can't really do anything like that, really, if you think about it. They can't really cheer you on. You can imagine that they're there, and we are all there, but there isn't anybody there. But I think it was difficult to watch this season. We'll be doing some more. Hoping to get some nice guests on over the next few weeks to do some season reviews and hopefully talk things through with some Albion fans and get their thoughts on the entire season. This is just sort of a recoup of the past week or so, and then perhaps the managerial situation. But we'll be having a couple of season reviews, and then we'll have a nice little summer break, I think, from the Albion. I think a lot of people have needed their break from the Albion. It's been a long season for the fans and the club, really. It's not been good. There's been rare moments of fantastic joy against Chelsea, against Southampton, some nice wins there, Wolves as well. That probably goes without saying, but there's been some nice wins in there. Unfortunately, there's been far too many defeats that have led to quite a lot of emotional strain on West Brom fans. Let's be honest, it's not been an enjoyable season. I think a lot of Albion fans have been reasonably upset by this season, and it's probably affected them quite a lot. But yeah, so it'd be nice to have a little break from the Albion. I think people have said that, and it'd be nice to go and watch the Euros and watch games without having to really rest on one particular side. I'm sure a lot of you will be supporting England, but I'm sure there are other nations. I think we've got some American listeners, but they won't be in the Euros. They'll be doing the Nations League in the North American sort of championships, and then there's the South American. I think there's a few Argentinian listeners from what I can see that listen to that. So it'd be nice to have a break. But today's game was 10% played for Albion. There wasn't much effort being put in, I think. Matt Phillips, for me, he played all right, but there were quite a few times where he moved away from challenges. The same with Maitland-Niles, who I thought was fairly poor. Had a chance to score and didn't really put any conviction into his shot. He's made 14 appearances for us now, along with Yukuslu, who's got 15, and then you've got Gallagher, who's played most of the season with 31. So there's been plenty of chances for these lone players, and obviously Diagne, who has got 16 games under his belt for West Brom. Obviously the first one of that batch of loan players to come in. He got 3 goals, 2 assists. Won't be keeping him next season. I think that's been made pretty clear by the fact that he's not been playing really. He played 1 minute against West Ham, and that was about that. But yeah, in terms of loan players, who would I keep? Who would I get to stay? So we've got Maitland-Niles, Gallagher, you've got Diagne, and you've got Kushlu. So Maitland-Niles, I keep. I send back to Arsenal. I send him back. I wouldn't keep him even if they were offering him for about £10 million. I wouldn't even look at that or touch that because he hasn't shown enough quality for me. I get that he's a tidy footballer. I get that he's got legs in the midfield. He's provided us with some fantastic cover and good energy in the midfield because he's young. He's a fresh player. But I wouldn't keep him if the price was £10 million, quite frankly. I don't think he's got enough quality on the ball. I don't actually think he works hard enough in that midfield. Another one is Conor Gallagher, who's debatable for me because he's available for £9 million. I don't think we'll afford that at all. I think it'll be one that a Premier League team will probably come in and pay for him. I think it's probably a job for somebody like Crystal Palace or Brighton. I could see coming in for him. But yeah, he's worked his socks off this season, Conor Gallagher, and he's deserved a big round of applause from West Brom fans because he's put his heart and soul on the line every single game. There's been no question about that. He's had every inch of effort has been put into West Brom, and that is a lone player that you're talking about there. That isn't a player who's been here since they were a child. That isn't a player who's been here for 10 years. That's Conor Gallagher, who's just come in to make his way as a footballer. But he's worked his socks off. Yes, he lacks quality on the ball, but he's done for me a very good job. He's been very, very active, always looking to put in a challenge. So I rate that from him. Playing 90 minutes week in, week out. For me, he's done a very good job, and I wouldn't really mind seeing him again next season. I know we won't pay $9 million, but it was, I wouldn't mind seeing him at all next season. It wouldn't be a problem for me. I wouldn't mind that because I know he'll put 110% into our shirt, whether he's playing on loan or playing on a permanent deal. And by Diagne, for me, is a no-go at all. Not for me. Sorry. I don't think he's got the goal-scoring prowess to score goals in the Championship. This is a nice little time to plug my latest article for WBA Latest, which is a social media network to do with West Bromwich Albion, and I've written an article about Mbaye Diagne, and there'll be a link in the description of this podcast if you'd like to have a little read, and it essentially goes through the sort of things that he's done this season and whether he's worth keeping. I mean, I don't think he's worth keeping. I'll spoil that for you now, but if I just read out a few things that I've said in that particular article and perhaps make some comparisons to other players in the Premier League, and we can talk about that because I think he's done an okay job leading the line, but quality is just not there, and the competitiveness has not been there. So he sits in the top 84% of strikers in the Premier League for aerial duels, winning 3.64 of these per 90 minutes. So that's a good value. However, in terms of losing aerial duels, he sits in some of the highest value for this particular stat, losing 7.51. So he's winning quite a lot. He's just getting involved in a lot, but he's losing most of them essentially. So that's one. And then shot creating actions, he's quite high up because he's our only focal point that we've been playing up front. So yeah, I can understand that. But he sits in the bottom 8% for attempted pressures in the Premier League this season for Premier League strikers with 10.46 per 90 minutes. So if you think Mbaye Diagne is pressing an opposition defender every 10 minutes is what we're trying to look at here. That's not good enough. That is not good enough. And he ranks in the top 96% of Premier League strikers for miscontrols per 90, which I think is a little embarrassing. My conclusion is, I, for one, haven't been wholly convinced that he'll be able to make his mark in the Premier League, despite providing a bit of a handful for Premier League defenders. I believe he could cut it in the Championship. However, with budgets set to be tight this summer, it's unlikely that wage demands will be let. I don't think he'll be staying. I don't think there's a cat and house chance that he'll stay because of the wage demands, and I completely understand that, and I get that, but, I think he could have given a bit more for the shirt he did for the first five or six games when it looked like there was a chance. But in the end, has fallen short of the mark and has disappointed a lot of Albion fans. As for Kushlu, the final loan player, you've got to put out the stops to sign him this summer. How I haven't seen people circling with how I haven't heard people thinking about signing Kushlu in the Premier League is beyond me, because he could do a job for any Premier League club for me. I think he's more than good enough, and he would deserve his place in the Premier League. How we haven't really got round that and tried to sign him on a permanent. I think we need to do it. I think you have to give your all for this, and unfortunately, you'll probably lose out to a Premier League club, but we've got to give 100% and try and sign him because he could potentially win us the league next season. He could potentially get you promoted. So Akaya Kushlu is a yes for me. But that's my thoughts on the current crop of loan players. But let's go on to talk about the manager because that's the most important thing that people are thinking about at the moment. With Sam Allardyce on his way out, managed his final game for West Brom today. Let's see who could be in the running for the next West Bromwich Albion manager. We'll be doing a special on managers at some point as well, a podcast special, perhaps at some point over the summer. But yeah, we'll be seeing who's going to be having a look at the managers right away. Let's go. Manager. Who's going to be the manager? Let's see. There's been quite a few front runners on West Bromwich Albion's shortlist, according to reputable journalists around the West Bromwich Albion camp. We'll look at what Joe Massey says about what he thinks about the about what he thinks about that. He tends to get things fairly spot on from the Express and Star about what he thinks about the manager. So let's have a look, and let's have a look at the finalising the shortlist. So, from my understanding, I think Chris Wilder is very high up in the priorities. He's a name on the list. So we've also got Valerie and Ishmael from Barnsley. John Terry apparently was a bookie's favourite, but he's not going to be on the shortlist, along with Eddie Howe. David Wagner is not in the running for the job despite being a bookie's favourite. But Allardyce, this is what Allardyce had to say about talking. Apparently he's had a hand in the decision. So he says, you've got to look at what success they've had, wherever they might have been, whether it's in the lower division or in this league themselves. I still think it's risky sometimes taking a foreign manager in this league to try and get up in your first season, unless it's a foreign manager who was already in the country. If he knows about the country and the way it works, it might be an option to bring somebody on without experience, but it's a lot more risky than somebody in this country, either British or foreign, that already knows the way it works here. And you've got to think about sustainability and building, because only 1 in 3 clubs go up on average in their first year. It may take a bit longer than many think. So, the angle that we're getting here is that they're looking for somebody who's experienced and knows the league, whether they've come up through the league or whether they've just managed in the league. John Terry is absolutely not on Albion's shortlist, according to us, which is very good to see, which is, rightful. I don't think anybody would really want John Terry as a manager. Just picking out whoever basically the manager wants, to be honest. But yeah, I'm concerned for what's going to happen, if I'm being honest, with the manager. I think there's not too many fantastic options, but there's some nice ones, some high-profile one, but there's not fantastic. So Chris Wilder is the bookmaker's favourite for a reason. We've had discussions, but according to quite a few reputable news sources, he wants more than £25,000 a week, which is what we've offered him, and he still firmly believes he's a Premier League manager after managing with Sheffield United. Yeah, if we're not convinced that he's been scarred badly by the experience of Sheffield United, he may just end up coming. Frank Lampard is probably the most high-profile name on the list. The former Chelsea manager has more going for him than just a reputation. I mean, he has got an ability to manage a good football team. But I feel like, it would give us a bit of pull in terms of players coming into the club. You think about the connections he has with Chelsea, perhaps even the connection that he has with Man City, because he did play for them for a little bit. So there could be a chance of some loan players in there. So, yeah, we'd have to see about that one. But, yeah, I think, he led Derby to the Championship playoffs and probably deserved to potentially go up, or unlucky not to go up. And his side played nice, attractive football in the Championship and then played some decent football with Chelsea. And he's up for developing those young players. I think Lampard, he's got to get this next appointment right for him, I think. I think whoever it is, whether he comes to us, I think he's been deterred a bit by the Palace job due to all the expiring contracts, because I think he knows that they could potentially be in a bit of a dogfight next season. However, I think Lampard could bring a bit of star quality, I know he'd be known as Frank Lampard, West Brom. I mean, that's pretty obvious, but I think he could bring something different to us. I think he could bring a bit of pulling power in terms of loan players and in terms of development. I think he could really help develop the younger players at the club, and I think that would do nothing but good for us. Eddie Howe has had 3 promotions on his Premier League, having led Bournemouth from League 2 to the Premier League. Bournemouth side played nice football, but he spent heavily in terms of getting in that final couple of seasons in the Premier League. He is an impressive character, but he doesn't seem to me like he's the right fit for what we're looking at, because he has spent a lot of money at Bournemouth. Other ones, Michael Appleton is one that people are looking at. My personal pick, I'm going to say it now before we start getting into what you think, is Enzo Maresca. I'm going to say Enzo Maresca. I mean, maybe he's not a serious contender, maybe he's not on the shortlist, but I think you need to give somebody like him a go. A younger manager, worked under Pep Guardiola, managed the reserves for some time now. I think it does feel a bit too early in his coaching journey, to be honest, but he did play for West Bromwich Albion. And I think he was put in charge for quite a few West Ham games when working under Manuel Pellegrini. So I would like to see him as the manager. Him or Frank Lampard. I'm not convinced on Chris Wilder, because he does make some odd choices with transfers. Frank Lampard would, for me, for the pulling power, but I kind of want Enzo Maresca. I want to see somebody like him come in. Who would Arteta manage before he hired Arsenal? He has done a pretty shabby job, but still has proved that he's got them into that Euro. He hasn't got them into European football, but he's managed to get them close to it and managed to get them towards a good European finish. But I believe that Enzo Maresca would do a good job. He plays some nice football, and I think he could develop quite a lot of players. And it's time to give somebody a proper rebuilding job. It's time to give somebody a proper challenge. And time to give us something sustainable, because at the moment it just feels like we're wavering. We're just wavering, waiting for that manager to come in who's going to just take us up. And I feel like we have to take a bit of a gamble to do so. But let's have a look at what you guys think, because I don't want to leave you out. I don't want to leave you in the lurch and show you what you guys think. I've given another option is Steve Cooper of Swansea, but I think the payout that we'd have to pay him is going to be a bit too much for us to handle, considering I know he's only got a year left on his deal, but I think considering Swansea's failed promotion, I think he may require some funds. So, podcast recording imminently. I'd love to know who your favourite manager, who you'd like to be the manager of West Brom is. I'll put the front runners in a poll, but feel free to stick your other choice in the comments. So, bottom of the poll, Steve Cooper with 8%. Next up is Valerian Ismail with 16%, Chris Wilder with 26%, and Frank Lampard with 50% of the vote. So you guys have made your voice clear. A comment from Black Country Cad says David Wagner. For me, David Wagner, he's not on the shortlist, but the way things went at Schalke, who used to be a very talented European club only a couple of years ago, does concern me a little bit about the way things went there. Frank Lampard for me is alongside Enzo Maresca is my first choice. I don't know whether I'm kind of romanticising that idea of Enzo Maresca because he's played under Guardiola, coached under Guardiola, but maybe that might be the case. But for me, I think we need to just rebuild. I think we need to just have a nice little project that we go with. We don't push the panic button. Don't expect to get promoted in your first season. Give it a bit of time, and then it might just come for you when you least expect it. But that's my thoughts on the Albion manager situation. It's going to be difficult, but we need to know quickly. We need to know now. But the season's over now. We'll be doing a bit of stuff, hopefully, in the next couple of weeks with some different guests, hopefully perhaps proving some different things and having a look at some managerial candidates and maybe looking back on the season behind us. But yeah, it's been a difficult one and it's been a long one. But we hope to see something better among the horizon for Albion fans and supporters of the club. I think it's nearly time to make that move and make that move in the right direction. We'll have to see. But Albion fans, it's going to be difficult, but you've got to stick with it. Trust the process. We'll be fine. And I promise that we will get back to the Premier League in a few years' time at least. I think we just need to be patient. We need to calm ourselves down. And we need to have a think about what we're doing before we start charging into situations. And the owner needs to go. I think he needs to sod off, to be quite frank. I think it's about time he needs to leave. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the manager situation. And cheers you guys for getting involved as well. But without further ado, that does bring me to the end of this week's Baggies Podcast. Thank you very much for joining me. Keep an eye out on our Twitter feeds for any potential next episodes and guest reveals. We'll be talking more about that towards next week, maybe a special guest coming in, and we'll see what we can do. I'll see what I've got up my sleeve, but I hope to speak with you guys soon. And hopefully, if you just go over to Twitter at the Baggies Pod, you can get involved. You can maybe just look at the guests, because I release them on Twitter and Instagram quite early. So at the Baggies Pod for both of them, make sure you just drop into that, and we'll see what we can do. But that is the Albion Albion fan podcast for this week, the Baggies Podcast. Thank you very much for joining me. And the season's over now. We can relax, just calm down. We can all calm down, and we'll see you hopefully next week. See you later. Goodbye.